Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to start in a couple of minutes as people are joining and to give people time to join in.
Good afternoon. It's 12:01, so it's afternoon, and I welcome you all to our webinar today, From New Haven to College and Back, Local Career Pathways for Returning New Haven Promise Scholars. I'm Will Ginsberg, I'm president of the foundation, and I am absolutely delighted to welcome our audience and to welcome Patricia Melton and Christina Ciociola. Patricia from New Haven Promise, and Christina will be moderating this discussion. I'm particularly delighted that you all in the audience have an opportunity to learn more today about New Haven Promise. In my view, from the foundation's perspective, New Haven Promise is one of the most important things that is happening in our community to build the future of this community. It's one of the most important things that we as a foundation do. As much as anything that the foundation supports, and we support so much of the nonprofit activity in our community, Promise represents the future of New Haven and the future of Greater New Haven, because this is all about the next generation of leaders in our community and of the civic backbone of community. New Haven Promise has actually been our largest line item commitment at the foundation since it was founded in 2011. This is our largest financial commitment, and I also want to note that Promise is supported generously and consistently by Yale University and by Yale New Haven Health System as well. The foundation has been involved since the outset, really since before the outset. We were part of the planning to create New Haven Promise that took place largely in the mayor's office in 2010. And if Emily Byrne is out in the audience, I know she was on the list. I do want to mention Emily for not only her role in putting Promise together back in 2010, but as the first director of Promise when she left City Hall and came to the foundation in 2011, more than 11 years ago now. When Promise started, it was about building a college-going culture in the schools and families and neighborhoods of New Haven, and about supporting our young people to go to college and to succeed in college. And Patricia Melton, in her now 10 years running this program, has done a marvelous job building the program, building the relationships, and building the network of Promise scholars and schools and career counselors, and also employers. And an important part of this conversation today is about that last piece. It's about the career pathways piece for returning Promise scholars. Originally, when Promise started, we weren't sure how best to define the impact on the community. Impact on the children, impact on the families was clear, but impact on the community, how to define that, how to measure that, what would the community get out of this major investment that we are making in these young people? And under Patricia's leadership, we have defined that as being about employment and about giving people the start, giving these young people the start to build their lives here, to build their careers here, and to build their lives here. And Patricia has built a network of employers as well as schools and families and neighborhoods. So in many ways, that the career pathway side, the and back to New Haven side of Promise is the return on the investment that not only the Community Foundation has made, but the other financial supporters has made, and this whole community has made. And in that sense, this really is about the future of our community. As I said, as much as anything that happens in our community, this is about building the future. If any of you ever feel a need or a desire to get assurance about the bright future of our community, I suggest you have Patricia introduce you to some of our Promise scholars, because they represent the bright future of our community. So with that introduction, I thank you all for being with us, and I'm going to turn this program over to Christina Ciociola, Senior Vice President of the Community Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. And I echo your excitement about being able to bring New Haven Promise to this audience. As we've really had a front row seat to the impressive success of this program over the years. I am Christina Ciosciola, Senior Vice President for Grant Making and Strategy at the Foundation. I'm going to go through some brief housekeeping for the webinar, and then we will pass it off to Patricia and Craig Carlson for a brief presentation, and then we will do some questions. So just for the audience, you are all muted and we can't see you. Closed captioning is on. If you want to turn it off, select the CC button on the top of your screen. If you're having any technical difficulties, please contact us in the chat, so that will go directly to staff. If you have a question, please put your question in the Q&A box. And please don't hesitate to enter your questions at any time during the webinar. You don't have to wait until the Q&A portion of the presentation. So I think that's it for the housekeeping piece. We are thrilled to have Patricia Melton, President of New Haven Promise, here with us today, as well as Craig Carlson, the new development specialist at New Haven Promise. And I think for introductory purposes, I think what I will say about Patricia is that you could certainly take the time in your spare time and read her very impressive bio of all of her accomplishments, including her most recent recognition. She was a recipient of an award, the Dick Edinburgh Award for Career Achievement Award. But what I would like to say about Patricia is that she's not just been leading the organization and the business of New Haven Promise, which is a nationally recognized Promise program. She's also played a significant role in the lives of these students and their families. I have seen her mothering and nurturing these students and really helping their families and the parents. I am always in awe of how she knows all of these scholars by name, and she really makes a personal investment in these kids and their families and really stays with them on their journey and their path to success. So for that, Patricia, I thank you, and I'm sure the students thank you, and many others thank you for that investment in these kids and their lives. And I also want to welcome Craig Carlson, who is the new development specialist for New Haven Promise. And I think both Craig and Patricia, you can come on the screen now. You can turn your cameras on. And I think, Craig, you're going to share your screen with some PowerPoint slides, and I will pass it off to you guys, and then I'll come back for some questions and conversation. So thank you again.
Great. Thank you, Christina. And I want to absolutely thank Will, who is on our board. And as he has said before, the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven really is kind of our parent organization. We were a component fund and really incubated here when we first began. So thank you, Will, and the team there at the Community Foundation, and obviously our other core anchor funders, Yale University and Yale New Haven Hospital. So Craig, if we can start. Okay, so all of you know, I think most of you do know about New Haven Promise. We've been around for 12 years, and there is a story before the story began. And as I have found out through, talking to a number of the individuals who have, who were critical in the startup of Promise, Emily Byrne, who I think is out there in the audience. I thank her. She is the original Mama Promise. And she did just yeoman's work organizing this under John DeStefano and Rick Levin, Will Ginsburg, Dr. Mayo. These were the big folks behind this, the leaders of our city, who were really thinking of a big idea in terms of what our city needs. And as we know, every city that's strong has a very strong education system. So this really model is about how to strengthen our public schools, which is the bedrock of any community, as well as strengthening it in terms of economic development. So the whole thought of Promise, and we are part of a national movement, the National Promise Movement. The first Promise program was started in Kalamazoo. It spread very quickly because, like so many urban cities across our country, there was just a lot of manufacturing base that was deteriorating. Just the entire economy of these urban cities was changing. Our number one employer back 40 years ago was Winchester Gun Factory, but our number one employer today is Yale University. Number two, Yale New Haven Hospital. So with just the type of citizen and person that we need to fuel our economy has changed. We're more of a knowledge economy. We have a thriving startup economy here. And that's what these leaders were thinking of. What sort of worker and citizen are we going to need for the future? And thus the concept of bringing this Promise model here was born. And again, these are the folks who were discussing it for a number of years. Yes, it was a big idea. And in Kalamazoo, as soon as that Promise program was announced, Kalamazoo Promise, the out migration of citizens moving out of the city for better schools was literally, it came to a halt. And so that kind of attention, that kind of achievement, just instant change in behavior is something that would catch the eye of any mayor. The mayors are very close and very competitive across our country. And so as soon as this feat happened, of course, there were many other cities that followed. Pittsburgh Promise, El Dorado Promise, Denver Promise. All of these other places wanted to look at what Kalamazoo had achieved. And so that's how it sort of came here as, John DeStefano was thinking about his legacy. What could he leave behind in a city that he loved so dearly? And Rick Levin and Dr. Mayo and Will Ginsburg, these were all leaders that came into their leadership positions at the same time. And so together, they embraced this idea of a Promise program for our city. And what is this Promise program? It's really an economic development intervention. And the purpose of it was very clear. You'll see here, New Haven School Change. Our Promise program was conceived by our founders as a comprehensive intervention that would strengthen our schools and strengthen the economic base of the city. And this is our leadership. So the chair of the board is the current president of Yale, Peter Salovey, and Rick Levin was initially. And these are all, folks who are big titans in our community. Marna Borgstrom, the president of Southern, obviously our mayor. These folks are critical when we're thinking about an intervention that is really going to touch every neighborhood of the city. And so who's in our universe? The public schools. That's New Haven Public Schools. And the reason it's a small p and small s is because we also embrace the charter schools. So Amistad, Common Ground, Booker T. Washington. And that universe is quite big. And we'll talk a little bit about what our strategy is. And we have roughly 800 students in state in college at any one time, now that we're at full implementation. A couple of hundred, probably 100 to 150 that are enrolled out of state. And those students are not eligible for the benefit, but they are eligible for all of the economic development work we do, which is around career launch, career and civic launch here in the city, because we want all of our talent to be able to thrive here. And we have approached roughly about 900 college alums. Those are scholars who have gone through their 4 years and they've already are in the process, or they have launched their career and civic lives. We have tons of collaborators, and I know I saw the list of folks who are attending, and these are organizations like Squash Haven, LEAP, Solar Youth. There are just a ton of nonprofits that are very important to helping us as collaborators along this journey. And then also our higher ed partners. And so it really is an ecosystem. As I said early on, when I first came here, what does it look like when an entire city embraces this young people to, through, and back from college? And this is what has driven our vision and our universe here in the city. So this is just a quick look summary on what we've achieved. It's actually 12 years, but we did this graphic last year. And we started, it was a phase in. So we started with a very small percentage. And I can remember because I was living in Indianapolis and there was some criticism because it was billed as we're going to spend $4 million. Well, we didn't start spending $4 million. We started with a phase in with the senior class graduating that first year. And so of those students who went to college, we spent roughly $78,000, but it was a small group of students. And then you'll see how the numbers really increase substantially. And if you look at in 2014, that was our first full cohort that was receiving 100% of the tuition benefit. And then you will see in 2018, that was sort of our first full cohort where all 4 cohorts were receiving 100% of the scholarship. So you'll see that those figures increased quite a bit. And we've had many milestones along the way. In 2014, we began our work in terms of our workforce development and realizing that most of our students are first generation to college. We realized very quickly that there was more work to be done about how to expose our scholars to the workforce and to career pathways, not just jobs, but livable wage careers. And so that has been the bulk of our work. So what have we done with our collaborators? And I always will speak in terms of our collaborators because we do work with a lot of partners here. And after just 5 years working with, again, the school district as a very strong collaborator, and we were very focused on the school district and school change, the graduation rate increased from 58% to 80%. And again, we do not take credit for that, but it's a combination of the different incentives that were in place. But I will say that we certainly contributed to it. And then the college enrollment has actually increased for New Haven public schools from 56% to 64%. Are we satisfied with that? Absolutely not. However, that is a significant move and shift that is starting to reap dividends. New Haven among our peer urban districts is has the highest percentage of students actually going to college. And so in a very short period of time, that's been the case. And then this digs a little bit deeper. This graphic is a couple years old, but I think it really dramatically shows what was going on. There was a decrease. Families were leaving the city around the 6th grade when you move into those middle grades. And so in combination with, a very strong partnership with the school district under its school reform movement, we were able to collectively reach and some metrics that pushed us to being actually the largest district at one point. And I think we go back and forth between us and Bridgeport, but how were we able to achieve that? One, I would like to say that students and parents and families, they get promise. What they see is that college is expensive, but promise, when it was announced, really gave folks a path forward. They knew that if they achieved a B average, did 40 hours of community service, showed up, you can't achieve unless you're actually sitting in that seat, that they didn't have to worry so much about college. Many of our scholars come out debt-free, and others come out with significantly lower debt to minimal debt who attend these colleges and our college partners. And you'll see that families select in the 5th and 6th grade, but it really still comes down to the student who decides to stay in college. So you'll see that New Haven made some huge strides with this BIPOC population in terms of retaining Black and Hispanic students who stayed in to graduate, because once again, they could see that pathway. If I do these things that the promise and our leaders have asked me to do, if I do my part, then I know I will have a path forward to be able to afford college. And that's what this slide demonstrates. So Craig, would you like to take?
Yeah, I think when I first joined, which was actually just about 2 weeks ago now, one of the first things that really jumped out at me is just how important it is that New Haven Promise is an inclusive growth strategy. So we are always focusing on making sure that every single member of the community is being exposed to the opportunities that we offer to scholars and students and their families. So we don't miss any neighborhoods, we don't miss any income levels. And in our data collection, you can see that every single ward, every single neighborhood, probably almost every single block has a New Haven Promise scholar at this point. And so we're creating such a wide and diverse base of talent that we're bringing back to New Haven. It's something that I think is really unique and really, really strong.
Great. There are, once again, I do have to give incredible credit to the founders who put this program together. Because when I came in 2012, it was very clear to me that it's an economic development intervention, that, the programmatic sort of muscle that needed to be put on that skeleton framework was very clear. And so when I came in 2012, I was able to focus through the generosity of, again, the Community Foundation, the generous funding there, Yale New Haven Hospital, and Yale. I was able to focus on, and the team, on building the program. That significantly distinguishes us from other Promise programs that have to focus very heavily on fundraising. So when I looked around the nation at our peers, they had, development departments, and many of the personnel were development. We were able to focus on programs and building a programmatic structure that would achieve the goals that we wanted to achieve, which in the end is about that return on investment, is about developing that workforce and developing citizens. I won't even say for the future, because our young folks are already assuming leadership positions. We have our first alder who's a scholar. And so we're really very excited about that. So the program breaks down to 3 components: to, through, and back. We love to keep things very simple. To is really the college access component, creating that college going culture in the city and the neighborhoods and the schools. So there's that component. Think of it as the K through 12. And we started as early as pre-K. I can remember I went to a kindergarten class and I had a promissory note. Of course, kindergartners didn't know what a promissory note was, but I gave them their promissory note and I said, I want you to cash this in 12 years, which of course is an eternity for a 5-year-old. But they understood. What do they want to be when they grow up? I want to be a doctor. I want to be a fireman. I want to be, it was endless. And so we do this work of college access with very strong partners with the public schools here and the communities and the wards and the neighborhoods. And once again, our requirements are, we keep things simple. So the 90% attendance rate is basically 72 days. What is the messaging that we have so strongly at this level? Parents, your job is to bring your children to school. And if they're missing more than 1 day a month, they're not on track to get promised. It's very clear. Entrenched absenteeism happens as early as pre-K and kindergarten. So we were able to focus on getting to know our constituency and our clients to build a program that would get the results that we wanted to get. So this is our first pillar.
And again, I think these data graphics show you just how widespread we are, not only among colleges and universities in Connecticut, but in our neighborhoods. And I'd love to draw attention to those top 2 neighborhoods as well. I came before Promise from the New Haven Health Department, where in the city we focus a lot on certain opportunity zones within our neighborhoods. And many of those are in the Fairhaven and the Hill neighborhoods, where as Patricia likes to say, talent is equally distributed, but maybe opportunity isn't. And I think that's the great thing about Promise, is that we are an equalizer in distributing that opportunity equally, making sure that the people who often go without seeing their talent realized because they're missing opportunities, we're making sure that we're reaching them closely and they're getting the chance to really fulfill their potential through Promise.
And you'll see that if you can go back to that slide, you'll see another distinguisher for us is that we are very heavily focused on data. We may have some hunches about what works, but mostly we look at the data, and the data tells that story. One of the things that happened when we launched our Promise program, we were criticized for having a 3.0 GPA, but that 3.0 is the GPA that says that a student is college ready. And so I like to say we are not an entitlement program. We are incentive based. We change behavior by being very clear about what that incentive is. It's an incentive model, economics, marketing. Why is Jordan shoes? Will folks who have very little money line up for those Jordan shoes? Because they have great marketing. And so that's what we do. We do marketing on what your life could be like. And as we know, so many of us are first generation to college, it's really about the end, that dream that we have for our children, for ourselves, we had for ourselves, if we went that pathway to live a livable wage career, our beautiful lifestyle. And that's what we really promote. So when you look at Fairhaven and the Hill, these neighborhoods, they understand what that American dream is. Look, their kids are achieving and they grab onto it. So parents and children, they understand at a very elementary level the opportunity that Promise is able to unlock for them. The second pillar for us is through. We follow students through a very long trajectory, from pre-K all the way up until they begin their careers, and we follow them even then, providing services. So the college success component is really about making sure that college is affordable, that families do not have to worry about mortgaging their home or pulling money out of their retirement or, you know, any of those things. They can really focus on their students doing well in college. So we do a lot of activities around educating our population, connecting them to the vast resources available on college campuses, because colleges have incredible resources. And so we, we are up to dispersing about $4.3 million a year. It as you saw, it raised very quickly, one, because tuition continues to go up, but we meet that tuition. So for every student who qualifies for Promise, which is about a third of students in the district, and about 75 to 80% of those activate the scholarship. And at any one time, we have roughly about 700 to 800 students in college. We've already looked to see how are we doing. So you, in this graphic, just focus on the dark blue. The dark blue is New Haven Promise. These are our students, and they are achieving well above the national average for college completion. So the periwinkle blue is the national graduation rate for different groups, Blacks, Hispanic, white, and you'll see drastically a huge value add in terms of what Promise and our partners are able to do for Black males as well as Black females. But we're really adding value across the board. And so in these next 10 years, we are striving, what we call strive for 75. We want to hit 75% across the board. And that's just our goal in the next 10 years. We're not going to be satisfied with 75%. We probably won't be satisfied with 95%, but it's a goal that we think is achievable. And then the last pillar is the and back. And that's the career and civic launch. And that is the part of our program that is just growing exponentially. We are now, with our college partners, are putting out close to 150 graduates a year who are coming back. That's a lot of bodies, and it adds up very quickly. Here are some of our incredible alums who are in some of those earlier classes. They're going into accounting, they're applying to business school, they've traveled to China, they've traveled to Germany to train with their company. In this case, James Baker Howard, who worked for Comcast, but he's now moving up and working for another firm, I think a German firm. Taylor Brooks, who is over an HR assistant at Cornell Scott Hill Health Center. And so this is really where the majority of our work lies. With all that we've built, it's running like clockwork, but for us to achieve that 75%, 80%, and to really make sure that all of our scholars are getting into, high quality entry-level jobs and the jobs that are in demand here in the city, that's where our work is, and that's where we need to grow to meet it. So though we have had great funding from our three core funders, where are we going in these next 10 years? Again, we're preparing our scholars for careers and to launch their civic lives and to be able to afford a home. We've already had folks who have bought their first home, got married, started a family. And so our scholars are at the beginning of their financial lives, and we want to make sure that that opportunity continues to grow, that is compounded opportunity, that they're able to really hit the ground running as citizens, as leaders in our community, and in their careers. And so, you know, at this point, we need to expand. We have, again, we've been very fortunate to have great multi-year commitments from our largest anchor institutions. But now it's time for us to move out of the incubation phase and really build Promise as an institution that the business community supports, as we're providing this incredible, diverse talent pipeline, homegrown and ready to rock and roll. So we're really very excited that we are at the opportunity to launch our newest initiative, Back New Haven, where we want to build out our Promise Council so that we can cover all, probably close to 10 to 12 industry sectors that are the sectors that are here within New Haven and New Haven County. And that's really where our work is. And that's going to take deeper programming. At this point, we have 7.5 people who work at Promise. We do more with less, but we really have big dreams around making sure that our scholars can really take their place in the city that they love.
Absolutely, Patricia. And I think here we have some further data that I'd just love to mention to everyone that, you know, we don't necessarily need to dive into, but as Patricia mentioned, our data here at Promise is so robust. We have just a plethora of graphics, of numbers on all of our students, all of our programs. And so it's really helpful, and we'd love to answer any questions about that as well.
Right. What he, can you just go back a couple slides?
Absolutely.
We did send out our first alumni survey now that we have a good number of alumni out there to find out, you know, are they coming back to the city? Well, yes, they're very much coming back to the city. Probably 85% to 90% of our alums want to be in New Haven. True. They don't want to go to Boston. They don't want to go to New York. They want to settle in the community that has invested in them. And they want to, you know, have their first apartment. They want to start their financial lives. And so we're really excited because the scholars have selected us. And part of that is us staying involved with them, helping them to get internships and, you know, in the many partners that we work through the city and across the city and at Yale. And so we're really very excited that we're able to launch our Promise Alumni Council in the next couple of months. We have our Development Council, we have our Business Council that's already been operating for a couple of years. So we know that our scholars are hungry for the best opportunities to make a difference in their community. Many of them have huge interest in some of the social impact organizations, huge interest in entrepreneurship and our ecosystem here. So we're really very excited. And with that, I will bring our presentation to a close, and we could throw this back up as there are questions.
Thank you so much, Patricia, and thank you, Craig. This has been really great, and I love all of the data and how you tell your story. We have some great questions in the chat, and I have some questions. So I'm going to ask one of my questions, and then I'm going to go to some of the questions from the audience. Can you say more about the internships? We've talked about the internships offline and how important the internships are, the paid internships, particularly important as a way to help break down some of the barriers to employment that particularly students of color and new graduates of color experience. So could you say more about that and about how you're placing students in internships?
Yes, we've been in the internship market since 2014. So we've been out there for a pretty long time. And it's really interesting because when I came in 2012, and then that was in August, by the time we got to the next year, the next summer, I had a number of scholars who were just like, well, I don't have an internship. They weren't really sure what they should be doing. And it dawned on me that a high percentage of our students are first generation to college. So they didn't necessarily know, well, what should I be doing in the summer? Should I be working at Starbucks? Working at Starbucks is fine, but if you want to be a nurse, you should be working in an internship that's in your career field. And so from that, we decided to have our first internship fair, which was in the lobby of the art gallery over on Chapel Street. And we had about 80 scholars showed up. We didn't know if we'd have anyone show up, but in fact, 80 scholars showed up. We had it in, I think it was January or February. I think it was January because we had it over the break, the winter break. And from there, that was really the beginning. And the next year, every year it has grown. So now we have an internship fair in between the winter break, because by the time we get to May, those internships, those paid internships are, they're gone and it's late in the game. And so we were able to provide some structure around the timeline when you should be looking for an internship. The best time to look for an internship is either the fall. You're late if you're looking for an internship in February or even March, because most of the corporate internships, they're taken. They've been seated, probably a year in advance. And so from that, we started that first year, I think we placed 24 paid internships, and we only work with paid internships because one of the things that we know is that, take Yale as a great example. Yale requires either 6 years of experience or an undergraduate degree and 2 years of work experience, and they only count paid experience. So volunteerism doesn't count and unpaid internship doesn't count. And so, the other thing is that probably 70% of our kids come from households under 60,000, and half of those come from households under 30. So it's just an ethical issue. It's an equity issue. So we've only worked with paid internships, and now we're getting back. The pandemic took a little bite out of us for a couple of years, but we're on track to place probably 170 students in paid internships. And we've also started with placing students in entry-level jobs and have had a number of placements. We've been doing that, but now that is going to ramp up as a true talent placement service.
Yeah, and I'd jump in real quick just to say too, like I just graduated from college a few years ago, and I, even in the few weeks I've been here, hearing some of the workshops that we do with some of our interns and the concrete skills that we're helping them build, I just think back to when I was struggling to find internships in college myself, and how it took me a little long to realize how important it is to develop some of those skills, and also to develop the network that really is the most important thing when it comes to looking for a job or finding a new job later in your career. And I think being able to expose our scholars to those internships early and really help them build that network out, that's where it really becomes a major combatant against the inequity that we see in our city and the kind of the disproportionate access to opportunities.
Right. I will say just quickly, and we can move on to another question, is that it actually, even though I've been involved with employment and HR, it crystallized when I started working here at Promise, because I realized that when you go to college, there's the academic component, but the reason there's the business club and the MBA club and the entrepreneurship club is to build your resume. And so we start right after the freshman year. We let freshmen focus on getting their academic chops together and a foundation, and we really focus on starting to build the resume out. So we build that resume starting the sophomore year. Everything that's in high school comes off, And now you're starting with a blank slate, but you're starting to build your first internship, your second internship, your third internship. Then that way, when you graduate, you have a nice, portfolio of paid experiences. And you can say, I'm proficient, I'm excellent in Excel. We've had a huge, nice pipeline for finance folks, anyone going into finance. We've just placed a ton of folks. Anyone who goes into finance gets picked up immediately. But those students have had internships, in Yale finance, over at Markham, or here or there. So they really are, when they come to the table for that entry-level job, that resume, that one-page resume has very robust experience that gives them a competitive edge.
Thank you. So we have several questions. I want to try to get through them all. So let's try to keep the answers brief. I'm going to start with questions related to the alumni and the NBAC part of the Promise program, and then I'll go to the other questions. So what are the types of supports that Promise offers to alumni to achieve living wage employment in the career fields of their choice?
Well, one of the things that we do as soon as they come in as a scholar, in other words, when they graduate from high school, we have them fill out a survey that finds out what they're interested in majoring in and what career sector are they interested in. And then they upload their first resume. So that first resume probably has on it, their community service, because the community service is a pre-career metric that helps them to explore what they like to do. I think I really enjoyed my time over here at LEAP working with kids. I think I really enjoyed when I was working, at the library, whatever it may be. So we bring them in and we start to really focus on working directly with them in resume workshops and connecting them to their career interests. We work with many different departments and employers all across the city. So we're connecting them. We also connect them to work with our Promise Council. These are successful business individuals who can mentor them, who can go out there and find the type of internship in the industry that they're interested in. And then we're working to prepare them for the matching process, which happens, like I said, at the internship fair. The matching season is from probably January to probably, we're still placing interns now, but the height of that is probably March. And then when they go into their internships, we have a whole series of professional development series that they participate in, that their employers give them permission to participate in, from, what kind of skills are they going to do, writing an updated resume. So at the end of their internship, at the end of the summer, they have to update their resume, put that experience on, and then the cycle begins again. So it's a 1-year experience, and all those students come in the middle of their freshman year, and we work with them all the way to their senior year. Once we get to the senior year, then we're working with them on actually placing them and presenting them to employers and full-time permanent positions in a career trajectory.
Great, thank you. So we have some questions about the numbers. So over the 11 years, what is the average total award per participant?
I will give you a range, and then I will give you an average. So for the scholarship, the average award is about $5,000 to $6,000, but the range of the award can be from $2,500 to $16,000. So at UConn, full tuition is just a shade under $16,000. But that's not the most lucrative part. I mean, that's very lucrative. However, we've actually negotiated leveraged scholarship. So for instance, at Quinnipiac, the privates are more expensive. We only give a small percentage of the privates money, really because of the cost. Many of those privates go out and raise money. And so at both Quinnipiac, Albertus Magnus, and UNH, they guarantee additional scholarship for any Promise Scholar, regardless of income, who decides to go to that school. So at Quinnipiac, that's $25,000. So if you get in as a Promise Scholar, which I've noticed the numbers started going up since we negotiated that deal, you're only getting $2,500 from us. That's not really the sweet deal of it. It's the $25,000. At UConn, for every Promise Scholar that goes to UConn, they get up to full tuition because it's based on Pell, and we don't really look at income, but certainly we definitely take into account federal aid so that we can reach more students. But every student who decides to go to UConn gets an additional $5,000. So not only if if you get $15,000, like we fund undocumented students, they're not eligible for federal aid. So
Right.
it's not unusual that student will be getting $15,000 plus now an additional $5,000, which would be $20,000. So you're starting with $20,000 on the table, and these will automatically renew as the tuition goes up. So it's not unusual. I mean, we've certainly given many families, just for one student, close to $90,000. And if they have a second student, which most families do have a second student, then there is no limit.
So this kind of gets to this other question, because you mentioned the privates. Does the cost of private colleges impact the number of students directed to private colleges versus public colleges? And it sounds like some of those private colleges have actually stepped up and are providing other additional assistance. And do you need more funding to give you more options for the students?
I will say that, the privates are doing quite well, actually, and particularly in the pandemic, I've noticed the privates are doing well. The publics, where we see the most need, actually is not necessarily at the privates, and I hope I don't get crucified for saying that, but it's really the CSCUs, like Central, Eastern, Southern, and Western. Because one of the things that a lot of people don't understand, including our families, and we had to sort of switch our saying to we make college affordable, not free, is because many folks hear, when we say up to full tuition, they hear full ride. And that's not the case. Tuition is only about, at a private college, tuition is most of the cost, 90% of the cost, or maybe 80% of the cost. That at a public, tuition is only about maybe half the cost, or a third of the cost. So we have to educate families that they still need to look for other, scholarship, because there are also mandatory fees. And at the 4 CSCUs, you have the tuition is about between 56 or 5,900, but the mandatory fees are just as much, 5,900, if not more. So that's kind of the unmet cost. So families are really shocked when they say, but you said you would cover, well, we make sure they understand it. It's just tuition. You said that you would cover, this tuition and fees, which kind of gets squished together. But in fact, we just cover tuition and a little bit of other costs in there.
Thank you. So can you say more about other collaborators? We know Yale New Haven Healthcare and Yale are businesses that you've partnered with, but are there plans, or can you talk about the partnerships with startups and other businesses?
I think, sorry, Patricia, I know you'll have more to add, but I think one of the biggest things that we're focused on now is building those relationships and developing them out even more with all sorts of businesses here in New Haven and the region. So I work closely with my colleague Jenny, who works with placing our scholars and alums with internships and full-time positions. And she's built some great relationships with a lot of businesses, as has the whole Promise organization. And we're working to cultivate those relationships and make sure that, we're expanding our reach to every major business, small businesses here in New Haven, and everywhere that we know can benefit so greatly from the incredible talent pool that we've kind of collected over the years, and how, we're such an asset to those businesses, and they can be such an asset to our scholars as well.
Right. I would say that you definitely have a huge startup culture developing, ecosystem developing here, and
Definitely.
biosciences. And so
Right.
we're working with some of those entities. We're working very closely with the chamber. I would say there's just a number. I mean, our scholars are everywhere. I think you have one there at the foundation, don't you?
Yes, we sure do. We've actually hired a few, but some have moved on to bigger and better things. And well, we have a Promise Scholar with us now.
And what department are they in? Where are they?
In my department, in grant making and strategy.
Okay, there you go.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. And I think we have so many opportunities too with our alumni council and our business council, and the programs that, can slide up right alongside those, and providing opportunities to not only network, but to provide mentorship opportunities for our students, for our graduates. And so I think that's really where we want to develop the programs out to encompass all sorts of local businesses here in New Haven, to make sure that, we're giving the opportunities to our scholars and showing them how great New Haven can be, and making sure that they're continuing to come back to our city.
Yeah, that is the goal. That's the ultimate goal.
Absolutely.
So we have 5 minutes left, and I have 2 windows open here for questions. We have some questions about the scholarships, some technical questions here. Is the Promise, and I know you've gotten this question a lot in the past, is the Promise Scholarship gap funding that fills in after the loans and financial aid? Is it mandatory to apply for federal or school loans first?
No, Promise is a middle dollar scholarship, so it's not last dollar in. That distinguishes us actually quite a bit. A lot of the other Promise programs come in after financial aid and even after loans. We're trying to reduce loans, so we only come in after federal aid. So I will give you a scenario just very quickly. So let's say a family that makes $90,000, but still college is not affordable. They have 3 kids. It's not affordable. I mean, 90,000 sounds like a lot, but it's not if for a family of 5. And so that family is not going to qualify for federal aid, but they do have need. And so we do require folks to apply for federal aid, just because we want to try and make sure we can continue to meet all the need that folks have who qualify for Promise. And so that family, if that child goes to UConn and they've lived in the city since kindergarten or 1st grade or pre-K, will get 100% of tuition. That means they will get whatever it is, 15,800 plus an additional 5,000. So their income will not be looked at, and that goes in. And so then it's whatever's left at that point, I guess. We don't look at other aid. The sort of cap comes with, are we going over the total cost of education? The total cost would include books, fees, room and board, incidentals. And there is a figure for every college that is called the total cost of education, that if there was some need that was left and you needed to take 1,000 or 2,000 in loan, you wouldn't be able to take more than that, because that would meet your complete need at that particular college. So our Promise Scholarship is not a first dollar, it's called a middle dollar because it does come in after aid. We do require folks to fill out the federal forms because we want that money first, but our money comes in after that.
And I think it is important to mention too how helpful the Promise staff is with the FAFSA and applying for that aid and helping walk students and their families through that process too.
Right, we're the statewide online provider of FAFSA. So if you haven't done your FAFSA, someone who hasn't, you can do it online from the comfort of your own home. You don't even have to bring your taxes out there anymore. We can do it all online in probably an hour and a half.
So I'll ask one more question as we wrap it up here. There's questions about the expansion of Promise, or if there's pressure from other towns to join the program, because it's a shame that kids aren't eligible because of geography. And I think part of that is Yale's commitment to the scholarship because it's specific to New Haven residents. But And I also know, Patricia, that you are called upon, not just in other towns, but other states around starting Promise programs. So can you say a little bit about the potential expansion of Promise?
Yes, we do have other Promise programs. Hartford Promise started, maybe 3-4 years after we did. There's now a Waterbury Promise. I would say there's been talk of a Bridgeport Promise, but we haven't been able to get traction there. All the Promise programs are hyper local. There are a couple of Promise programs that are statewide, like Tennessee Promise, but Tennessee Promise is really focused on community college. And so that's sort of a different strategy. And you'll see those statewide Promise programs in places that have huge need to increase degree attainment. And so, if you look at Tennessee and say, where does it rank in terms of college attendance of the 50 states, they're probably down there in the last quarter of like number 40. And so, usually it's a huge, because even in, I came here from Indiana, and Indiana, Ohio, and a number of those Midwest places they were at the bottom in terms of college attainment. And so they jumped into the early college high school movement to increase college attainment. So here in Connecticut is near the top, even though there's still lots of obviously individuals who need to go to college here. But, Connecticut is kind of in the top tier. And so I think that certainly, I think Bridgeport, and there are other places that can certainly bring in a Promise program. And there are many things that you can do. I mean, it's nice to have Yale, and I want them always to be there. But I will say that really the Promise dollars it's the hook to open up a lot of other dollars that comes. So it's a little bit of a sleight of hand and a smoke and mirrors, but what it does is it gives families a path, and they know if they apply here, that then all of the other funding gets released. And that's really what Promise is in all of these communities. It's the hook that keeps people hopeful and a pathway. And then once we get them in, then they can unlock everything else. But without that, people lack hope and they just give up. And so that's why we say that Promise is incentive based. It's very clear what families need to do, what our community, what the business community, what foundations, everybody has a role. And that's what we did when I came. We did a little role clarification. And so that's why I always thank our funders. I thank our partners, because it really has been, cultivating the ecosystem. So this can be replicated. It may look different, but it can be replicated in just about any community. And who best would be invested than local? We're going to be invested in our own. So it's really hard to run a Promise program like from distance. It really is a locally based kind of intervention.
And yeah, I think that's so true, Patricia. And I often think of, we had a convening on inclusive growth a few years ago, and one of the speakers said something that has just been seared into my mind as we think about this work, and is so relevant to the work you do, is that if we want to be an inclusive community and promote inclusive growth, we must focus more on being a greenhouse and not a magnet. And in other words, how do we nurture our own, as you are doing, and bring those kids back to the community, and worry less about being a magnet and attracting new people, because we have the potential talent and the folks right here in our local community. And I think we all can play a role in that ecosystem with you.
Oh, absolutely. I say talent is everywhere, equally distributed. It doesn't matter, all over the world. Talent is everywhere. How do you cultivate that talent? And our model believes in cultivating it right here. We don't need to send folks away. Even when they're at college, they're still very connected and nested in this community. We don't need to send them away, because then they won't probably make it back. Look at me, here I am. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I went away to cultivate my talent, and I just don't have the pathway to get back there. So fortunately, that's great for New Haven.
Right. We're glad you're here. Well, thank you both very much. This was very interesting, and I learned a lot. I always learn something new when I talk to you, Patricia. And thank you to our audience and your questions. If you did not get your question addressed during the session, you'll be receiving a follow-up email from the foundation with a recording and the slides and other information about resources and what you could do. And we'll try to address some of the unanswered questions in that communication. Please remember to complete the evaluation survey from the session. It's really helpful to us in evaluating the session and kind of what we do next. So thank you all for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
And thank you, Christina.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.